Hey y'all, welcome back to the Yes We Can podcast. Today I have someone that is very near and dear to my heart, Dr. Kian Lim. He was my late husband Kyle's oncologist. So Dr. Lim, thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate you coming tonight.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's
Yes.
an honor and a pleasure to be here.
Yes, of course. I'm going to need you to use a big, bold voice tonight, Dr. Lim.
Okay.
There we go.
It's a long day in clinic. So
I know. He saw how many? 39 patients today? 39 patients.
Wow.
I know. And we'll talk about the need for more pancreatic cancer doctors and researchers during our conversation today. But first, can you give us just a background of where you're from, your schooling, and then why you decided to go and do pancreatic cancer research and seeing those patients?
Yeah, happy to. I was born in Malaysia, which is a small country in Southeast Asia. I went to Taiwan for medical school, and after finishing medical school, I decided to become an oncologist. At the time, it was back in early 2000. There was very little that was known about why cancer came along and how we treat cancers and why we give this cancer this chemotherapy and that cancer the other kind of chemotherapy. All we were told is just memorize it and give the chemo and that's it. So I had a lot of questions in my mind, and that's when I decided to come to the US, and I basically was enrolled, lucky enough to be enrolled in a cancer biology program, a PhD program at Duke University.
Okay.
And after I finished my PhD, I came to WashU for a physician scientist training program. It was kind of one of the top programs in the country that is designed to train doctors who do research at the same time. So basically, you're bridging yourself in between lab research and clinical research, and your task is to develop novel therapies for cancer patients. And I finished my training, went to the National Cancer Institute to finish my oncology fellowship, and in 2013, I came back to WashU because I have so much love for this place in the city.
Yeah, we're happy that you're here. So our story goes how we met. As I mentioned, my husband was diagnosed October 24th of 2021. We went into Mercy, the ER, one Sunday morning because my husband had been experiencing pain in his stomach, and his bowels became irregular. And some people may get a little squeamish about that, but it is what it is, especially when you're talking about, ultimately GI cancers. We really should all be fueling our body and have regular bowel movements and know our body well. So we knew something was wrong with Kyle all of 2021. We ended up going to Mercy ER thinking perhaps it was a bowel blockage. I had to call a sitter to come that Sunday morning because my husband actually, he vomited, which was odd. So we had to come watch our kids. Our kids were 4, 2, and 11 months at the time. And we went into Mercy, and my husband said to me on the way there, do you think it's stomach cancer? And I'm like, no way. And my husband was a hypochondriac, by the way. Dr. Lim, he was a nervous Nelly, okay? So we're driving in, I'm like, you do not have stomach cancer, Kyle. It's fine, we'll get it figured out. So we go to Mercy Hospital, which, by the way, is not a research hospital. It is not a cancer hospital. It's just go to the ER if something's wrong. And they ended up doing a scan, and hours later, it felt like came back in the room and told us that there was a mass on his pancreas and some on his liver. So there are 3 masses total. And my first question was, well, it's probably benign. Like, can you just take a biopsy? And they said, no, we cannot. This looks like cancer. So, it's a long, drawn-out story, but they had to drain his belly. Long story short, we ended up deciding we wanted to be treated at Siteman. So we had to call around to get a bed at Siteman because of COVID, all the beds were taken up. Finally got a bed at Siteman, and then I believe that's when you were called. We were told that we could see you because you see patients on Thursdays. So Dr. Lim does research and also sees patients in clinic. He also travels all over the country trying to find grants for his research. So the more I know, and we'll share more, the more I really want to emphasize tonight, you guys be thinking about the need for private funding for cancer research. It is extremely important, and it's really why my husband isn't here today. So anyhow, we were lucky enough to get to talk to Lim, and so I'm gonna then pass it over to you. Kyle's in the hospital. You know, you accept our case. It was kind of we had to come back from the hospital, but anyway, Dr. Lim, I'm gonna throw the ball to you.
Yeah, I remember vividly what happened at the time because Kyle and Kira is such a unique and special patients to me. So I first saw Kyle in the hospital when he was there. I remember looking at CT scan. I went there as a consult. He was in the hospital for a few days already, and at the time, his bowel had perforated from the cancer, and there was some abscess. They put a drain in, and they were ready to just ask Kyle to go home.
Yeah, hospice.
Because surgeons would do anything, and radiation wasn't an option, and nobody wanted to give him chemo. So I went. They wanted me to come by and just reinforce what they were thinking. So I looked at the CAT scan. One thing that caught me was the age. So I went in and I saw Kira, I saw Kyle, and at the time my research was coming along. I had some ideas on what, how powerful the drug that I was working on, at least in mouse models, it made the tumor disappear. Pancreatic cancer disappear along with immunotherapy. It was good timing. I saw Kyle and I believe I saw the kids. That's when I changed my mind. So we started getting him stronger. We put him on TPN, I remember that.
Can I stop and reiterate something real quick? So my husband's in the hospital. We didn't know this, right? We didn't know. They were kind of hinting about Kyle not living very long, but so Dr. Lim, all his colleagues were telling him, put this guy on hospice. And so when he walked in the room and saw how young we were and how young our kids were, he changed his mind, right? So, that's something I found out later, and I'm forever grateful that you made that choice, because the reason other doctors didn't want to work on him is because of the abscess, because of how bad of shape he was, right? Like normal patients, you just put on hospice, right? So, that's, we're forever grateful that you decided to take on his case.
It's a natural decision that I made, and so it felt okay to me to do that. So at the time, the bowel had perforated; he was not able to eat. So I decided, okay, just give him, just put him on IV nutrition, total parenteral nutrition, where it's okay not eating, but he's going to get all his nutrition through IV. And a week or 2 weeks later, I saw him in the clinic, and we decided to just go ahead and do chemotherapy. At the time, I was kind of still working on getting the drug approved for a clinical trial. And in order to open a clinical trial, that means you are combining a study drug with chemotherapy, with immunotherapy. You need to have funding. And we've been fighting to get funding for a year or two right now at that time, and we couldn't get it. So while waiting for that to come through, we started him on a chemotherapy that I'm sure if you know patients who are going through the process. It's called FOLFIRINOX. It's basically a cocktail of 4 chemotherapy put together, given every 2 weeks, and the patient goes with a pump. And that's kind of a heavy gun chemotherapy with a lot of side effects. And not surprisingly, Kyle had a lot of side effects. And more importantly, after 4 cycles, we did a CT scan, it didn't work. So his tumor had gotten bigger, his tumor marker went up, his body weight had dropped even further. So that's when I decided to put him on a second line of chemotherapy, which is gemcitabine and Abraxane, every 2 weeks and every 3 weeks. And well, his tumor was quite aggressive. It didn't work very well. The tumor marker stayed stable. He was struggling with weight gain, but fortunately his bowel started to open up. So that's when the compassionate use came through. So I was able to convince the drug company to give me the drug for 1 patient, and we were able to get insurance and to pay for chemotherapy. It was at that time called Keytruda, and which is otherwise not approved for pancreatic cancer. And we combined it with Abraxane. And within a few a few 2-3 months, his bowel started to open up and his tumor marker came down and he started feeling better.
I'm gonna stop it here. So there are only 2, now maybe 3 standard of care treatments for pancreatic cancer because there's not enough research being done in the GI space. So Kyle had the first round for Fearnox and they told us it was a mixed response, but his tumor marker went up, not good. Second line, gemcitabine, again, his tumor was stable. What happens in a lot of cancers, and correct me if I'm wrong, essentially the cancer learns the chemo, right? Like the cancer, especially pancreatic cancer. And so at that point is when I looked at you, Dr. Lim, and said, what else is there? Remember? And you were like, well, there's studies in labs right now,
Yeah.
but what do you need? And you said money, funding. And I'm like, what do you mean you need money? Funding. And I'm like, how much money? You wouldn't tell me how much. And then finally I got it out of you that it's $3 million. So this is important for everybody to know. Dr. Lim had a study in mice that had eradicated the cancer 4 different times, okay? He submitted to the FDA for funding 3 or 4 times, am I correct?
The National Cancer Institute.
National Cancer Institute, I know, all the acronyms. The National Cancer Institute, and they had pushed back for various things, not because of the clinical evidence, but because of like needle size or something simple. The long and short of it is an amazing drug that was getting rid of pancreatic cancer in these mice was being held back by a couple $3 million, let's say. So in my mind, I'm like, I can find $3 million. Long story short, we got compassionate use because of all the connections. But I want to stress that point that cancer research funding is so few and far between. And unfortunately, cancers were on the rise. GI cancers were on the rise. And I know a lot of people have questions about that. Maybe we can talk about after. But cancer research funding is not on the rise. It's not. So cancer's rising. Cancer research funding is going down. I actually went to Congress, as you know, and tried to lobby and fight for more money for cancer research last year. And they actually, it's not like I'm making a big difference, but long story short, they cut the funds again this year. So there's fewer dollars going into cancer research as it's going up. So this is why I am so passionate about privately funding the most promising studies, and I feel like God put us together, truly. So,
yeah.
Now.
Yeah, Kira, you mentioned a critical point. So the $3 million is not for me. If you have a clinical study, a clinical concept, there are a few obstacles. Number one is the science is good, and that we check that box. Are you able to get a drug, the new promising drug from drug companies who develop that? We check that box. And then you have the infrastructure to do the clinical trial, because clinical trial, there's a lot of uncertainties. You need to have a very experienced team to know how to give the drug, how to manage the side effects, and how to give it safely. And we check that box. And the last thing is funding. So the funding is intended to provide patients with the drugs, so they don't have to pay anything out of pocket. You are doing extra visits and extra blood tests just to make sure everything is safe. And you have to do regulatory reporting to the FDA with every patient. And then the manpower to come in, the study coordinator who comes in, then will see you. The money is for those purposes. And without that, you cannot simply just open the study and say, hey, we just, build a plane when it's flying. You have to have all this funding, otherwise FDA will not approve. Washington will not approve the clinical trial. So we are kind of on one hand dealing with the urgency of patients getting sicker, needing more therapies, and on the other hand, not having enough funding. So the biggest funder for these kind of clinical trials is the National Cancer Institute. And when we apply for funding, you apply for typically $3 million, $2.5 to $3 million to have a study that's available for 50, 60 patients. And it's a competitive process. You are competing with Harvard, Kian Andersen, Sloan Kettering, and every other big centers. And these places, of course, they are magnets for this kind of funding. Very little money will come here in the Midwest. And we're doing a good job, actually, at getting funding over here. And that's one thing. The other thing is, you are competing with other cancer types. There's breast cancer, prostate, and there's a larger crowd.
A larger crowd, yes, larger
crowds.
crowd.
And pancreatic cancer, you can see a lot of them because they're sick. and that they don't have the energy to come out and lobby anything. So you have to compete with that, and then within the NCI, you also have to compete with what kind of research. And in my shallow view, there are research that describe the problem, there are research that try to solve problems. And to me, obviously, we have to learn how to solve problems. So there's a lot of competition at many levels. And
sorry, can we stop here and clarify? So they're putting a lot of money into what, prevention, testing, which is good. We need that, and we need to find treatments for people getting cancer right now, because it's on the rise and it's not slowing down.
And you don't get that kind of urgency unless you're on the front line in the clinic seeing patients and talking to patients and seeing their faces, their families' faces. That gives you a sense of urgency. And that's something that we've been trying very hard to try to convince the NCI that we need more attention here. But of course, limited funding is a major obstacle. And we are very grateful to you for helping us out and raising funding through Better Course and through all kinds of events. We are getting very close to the mark where we can open a clinical trial that I hope will benefit. You know, if you have friends who are better in the process, we're hoping that we can open a clinical trial for you guys.
Yeah, and yeah, so many things running through my head, but I want to talk about real quick so we've been talking about $3 million-ish, right, to get a phase 1 trial open. That's with 50 to 60 patients, okay? 3 million, 50 to 60 patients. My husband's treatment cost $2 million. I did the math. $2 million for him to be alive for 17 months. That doesn't count our loss of income, because Kyle and I were in the hospital a dozen times, 10 blood transfusions, 70 whatever, we were barely home. The cost of childcare, for us to have childcare for our babies. So $3 million for 50 to 60 patients, right? A promising study, or $2 million to keep one alive for 17 months. In my mind, I'm like, the NIH or NCI, they're the biggest funder, but you guys, that's a problem, right? That's a problem because it's really hard for promising researchers to get their studies funded, especially in GI, as he was saying, in pancreatic cancer, because these guys are sick, right? And so, and a lot of researchers, correct me if I'm wrong, they're not as enamored with pancreatic cancer, right? So you guys are also recruiting physicians, researchers to come study these GI diseases because they're on the rise. So it's not a pretty cancer, right? But it's it's on the rise. It's affecting patients younger and younger, and we have to make a change, or it's going to continue the way that it's going.
Yes, that's correct. GI cancer is rising, and we are dealing with patients who are living longer but on chemotherapy or something. So there's a lot of attention that's needed. And we are also at the same time facing a shortage of GI oncologists nationwide. So I'm the director of GI oncology at WashU. And I'm friends with a lot of GI oncology directors throughout the country. And everybody's facing the same problem. And whenever we meet in national conferences, the first question we come in our mind, do you get somebody? Do you have somebody who wants to come to St. Louis? Do you have somebody who wants to come to New York and things like that? So that's putting a toll on the whole system. And even here in St. Louis, I'm sure some of you may experience, if somebody gets diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, it takes a while to get to see
a doctor.
To see a specialist.
Yeah.
More likely than not, you're going to see a general oncologist who sees everything. And for pancreatic cancer, we would prefer that you see a specialist because their needs is quite unique. There's a lot of support that's needed for GI, pain control, dietitian, all those things.
Yeah, it's very complex, and it was very confusing and overwhelming for us.
Yes.
Getting a disease, cancer, that word in general, you never think it's going to happen to you. In fact, one of my best friends beat stage 3 colorectal cancer. We were in her apartment building having a no more cancer party. She used a different word, but no more cancer party. And I remember her husband saying, thank you so much for being a part of Joe's Army. She had colorectal cancer, was treated at Siteman. But what he said really struck me. He's like, 1 in 2 people will be affected with cancer in their lifetime. And I remember looking around the room and being like, wow, I feel bad for everyone else who's gonna get this, not knowing my husband was gonna be diagnosed a year later. So some people, it takes your own personal story for you to really understand just how serious this is. And that's why I am 100% on board supporting you, Dr. Lim. I mean, I've offered to, I'll go talk to those medical students about going into GI cancer, and I'll go run around and try to get these grants, because instead of being in the lab studying these mice and these clinical trials, he has to be on airplanes. They joke that these oncologists are, grant writers, and I'm like, that's not funny. That's not funny. These guys should be in the lab. They should be seeing patients, but they're begging. Did you go to school to learn how to market yourself and run a business? No. You went to school to treat patients. So the more I know, the more on fire I am to help make a change. Now, there are a few questions I want to ask you that I got from some people online. And the first question is, why, Dr. Lim, do you think GI cancers are on the rise and affecting patients younger and younger?
Yeah, it has to do with a few risk factors. And number one, we are what we eat. So there's a lot of...
We are what we eat.
We are what we eat. So a lot of the exposure to the environmental toxins, that's a key thing. There's a lot more, synthetic product nowadays. You really know what goes into your food and the containers and all those things, and the pollutants in the air. So all those will go into your gut, and your gut will absorb these things and be exposed to all these toxins. And eventually you see a rise, for example, colorectal cancer, you see a huge increase in recent years. Pancreatic also, there's an increase affecting younger and younger patients. And the other risk factors, obesity and lack of exercise, those has been shown to induce inflammation in the gut. And there's a lot of mouse models to support that. And that's also a risk factor for GI cancer. And so this is not just here in the US. Worldwide, we are seeing the same phenomenon. Anywhere you go, developing countries, you are seeing a rise in GI cancers. And it's not just the colon and pancreas. We're seeing a rise in liver cancer as well, bowel duct cancer, anal cancer, and those are all the diseases that we treat. So it's the same tube that goes all the way from the mouth to the other head. So everything along the way will be affected.
Yeah, it's important. I was a health and wellness coach before Kyle got sick, as you know, and then now I'm on fire about it because I lost my husband. My kids lost their dad, and it's not fair. And so, the number one thing you guys need is money.
Yeah, we need patients to be aware, and we need public and government to be aware of how important it is to support cancer research and cancer treatment.
Yes.
Yes, and of course funding is important. We are passionate about what we do, and we are not looking for money. We're not
no, we know it's not going to your pocket.
Right. So we love what we do, and we take a lot of satisfaction in being able to treat patients and make their lives better. So starting from doing lab research and bringing it to patients, that's what we want to do. So we can't do anything if we don't have money. That's a reality. And then when we go to the National Cancer Institute asking for research funding, they'll ask, what is your evidence? What is your scientific evidence? Have you treated these in mice and all those things? You have to provide this evidence, and that comes with research.
Which costs money.
But the money is not a lot compared to where else money is spent. But I'm not going to comment on that too much. But
I'll comment on it. What are you trying to say?
So there's a lot of money that's spent elsewhere that I think it's just
like the government's money, people's money.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So for example, the total budget of the NIH is just a small fraction, single-digit
budget of the NCI, correct?
It's just single-digit percent of the whole DoD budget. So,
you guys know, everybody understand what that means, right? Of the government's budget, the National Cancer Institute's budget is in the single digits.
Right.
That's a problem, right? Because cancer's on the rise, people are getting it. And we need more funding, and it's, I don't know, it's just, we really need to know and be aware that cancer's on the rise, it's everywhere, it's gonna affect somebody you know and you love.
Yeah, so that's one thing, getting funding. And the other issue is the distribution of the resource. Wall Street's doing a fantastic job, but compared to other major medical centers on the coast, we are relatively still a little bit underfunded, and considering that we have a massive population here. So we don't want patients to come to St. Louis just to go to the airport or fly to Houston or New York. They need to come here to be treated. So it's really important for patients, especially with pancreatic cancer, to be treated close to home, because they want to go home. They don't want to be that MD Andersen living in a hotel and just coming back and forth and be separated from their family. They need to be treated locally.
Well, it's already a nightmare. I mean, even for us to be in and out of our own home, I mean, it was a nightmare.
Yeah.
You know the ins and outs of everybody, but I was very vocal about our struggles because it was top to bottom, inside out, family on the outside, trying to keep our family together on the inside. Kyle's super sick. I mean, he was sick, as most pancreatic cancer patients are. He barely got out of bed for 17 months until he got your treatment, a compassionate use treatment, and then he was able to live. In fact, his nephew got drafted to the Atlanta Falcons, a little plug, number 44, Kira Andersen, who started his freshman year, and that's what I think God has orchestrated this whole thing, because Kyle would muster up the energy to go to Troy's football games. Not necessarily, he wouldn't go to the fridge to get anything to drink. It's fine, I got it for him, everything he wanted. But he was able to see like 5 or 6 of my nephew's rookie year in the NFL. And so I think God gave him that extra 12 months. God, allowed your study, your work to get into him. And let's talk about it. It worked. By December, his cancer was non-active. What it did in the mice, it did in Kyle. The only reason he passed away were some side effects that can happen. And he was already so compromised. So my point in saying, whenever I say my husband's not here because of the lack of cancer research funding, it's because that study has been waiting for funding. They've been submitted to the FDA again and again. So, go ahead.
So we after a few years of coming back and forth with the National Cancer Institute, we finally got it open. But my original intention was to have it open here in St. Louis so we can enroll patients here, 50, 60 patients here. But it's open through the NCI. They say, okay, we like your concept. It's fantastic. Let us do it. So they provided funding. We gave them the drug. And it's open in 12 different major centers right now throughout the country. And we have so far enrolled 13 patients.
Total.
It's ongoing. None of them are from St. Louis. Sorry, but this is also exactly what I was trying to avoid.
You guys understand that? So because I wasn't able to get him $3 million, I said I would get you $3 million. I didn't put a price line on it.
Right.
The NCI saw how well it did in Kyle's body. Right? It saw his clinical treatment, it saw what it did to Kyle, so it opened it up to a multi-center study, which is great, right?
Including WashU.
Including WashU, but it's only 2 of the 3 drugs because the NCI is studying safety, right? If Dr. Lim would have gotten that money, he would have been able to put all 3 in his patients. Long story short, it's fine, great, the ball is rolling, but the whole point, the reason I joined Pedal the Cause, because we're going to have $1 million into Dr. Lim's hands by the end of this year, because we're going to raise $700,000 this year. We raised $300,000 this year, and the whole point is to get the money into the hands of you and your team to be able to open a study here, hopefully in St. Louis.
Yep.
Am I saying too much?
No, that's
okay.
exactly.
Sometimes he's not allowed to say something. I'll say some. Sometimes I'm like,
that's exactly what I'm trying to do.
Is that too much?
No.
There's David.
Yeah. Hey.
So anyway, where are we on time? Just making sure. Last time we went a little over.
30 minutes.
Oh, good. We're doing great.
Okay, great.
All right. What other points you want to make, Dr. Lim?
Yeah.
What do you want people to know?
Yeah. So there are a lot of exciting developments in terms of new drugs for pancreatic cancer. I've researched pancreatic cancer for more than 20 years. And I studied a gene called KRAS, which is mutated in almost all pancreatic cancer patients, including Kyle. And for the longest time, there was no solution to that particular mutation until recently. So there is a star drug that basically just exploded because the company didn't expect it to work so well. And when the trial was open, we were excluded. Of course, you know,
Who is excluded?
St. Louis is excluded. It's open at MD Anderson and Sloan Kettering and the coast.
Why was WashU excluded?
Because it was a small study. They only wanted 50, 60 patients, so it makes sense to open it. You typically start there.
Okay.
They are the major centers.
Okay.
And it worked well, and we do have patients who are desperate and went to Houston and got on the study, and it worked. So we have finally gotten the drug company to agree to open it here at WashU. In a month or two, we open here. And I would like to say that don't lose hope. There is a lot of new things coming along. And part of my research, which hopefully will be with your help, will be to use this drug in combination with another, basically antibody drug conjugate called HER2. And we have shown that when these two combine together, you make the tumor disappear in mice. So that's another finding that we're really excited about. And we want to open the trial again. This is like 2.0. Take two with another study. They want to open here in St. Louis.
Yes.
And again, 50, 60 patients. And like I said, the check boxes are checked. We got the drug, we have the people, we have the science, and we want to try to open the study here.
Yeah, so there is hope. I mean, there's some pancreatic cancer patients here in our audience here, for those of you that are online. And, you know, I think that's one thing that we always held on to. You know, people always tried to say, you know, Kyle's only going to last a few months. Like, oh, we're really sorry. This is a terminal cancer. And we just were like, no, we're going to, like, we have hope. Miracles happen. And the fact that these studies are actually happening, you know, one in a month or two, and then when you get more funding, another one here in St. Louis, like maybe it's not the silver bullet, but you're going to learn, clinicians learn a lot, right? And it's going to do a lot of good no matter how it turns out. But, you know, promising studies in mice, we got to get them into humans, and it's funding. That's what it comes down to. So, yeah. Should we open up to questions?
Sure.
Does anybody have any questions? Anybody? Anybody? Nobody? What's your question?
Me?
Yes.
How soon of a time frame is it? Like if you hit the goal, what is the turnaround time for when something can be put into action and you can get the study started?
So if we can get enough funding, all we need to do is write up a protocol. And WashU is actually nationally, we pride ourselves on being able to open the study very quickly, usually around maximum 3 months. 2 to 3 months, we can open the study.
So for those of you listening online, the question was, how long does it take once we get the right amount of funding into the pancreatic cancer program at WashU? How long does it take to get a study into humans? And that was Dr. Lim's answer, 2 to 3 months.
3 months.
So.
You do have to get a protocol approved by the institution. There's a group of experts who look at the protocol and say, is this dose correct? Are you paying attention to side effects? How are you going to monitor the patients? Do you have manpower? And then once that's approved, you have to submit to the FDA. And they have to review everything. And they look at the science, the drugs, and all these supporting letters, and the infrastructure of the institution. We're always one of the best in the country. And then they'll tell you, okay, it's approved. That's when you can start getting the pieces together and the drugs over here to the clinic.
And let's talk about here, we haven't talked about this. Do close your ears. So the 5-year survival rate for pancreatic cancer is now 12 to 13%. I think it was like 10 when Kyle was diagnosed. So the number is headed in the right direction. But pancreatic cancer is very tough to treat. So there needs to be more research. We need more funding in this disease because there hasn't been for a really long time. For a long time, there are only 2 standard of care treatments for this awful disease, and less than 30%, 36% of patients even responded.
Correct.
So we're making headway.
Yes, we are.
Yes, we need to talk about it more and fund it better. Anyone else have questions? Okay, David?
Are there any breakthroughs on diagnosing pancreatic cancer sooner,
Mhm.
which would
Yeah.
presumably give a better chance for survival.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna repeat that question. The question is, are there any, what did you say?
It's
Are there
diagnosed.
any breakthroughs?
Any breakthroughs in catching,
Diagnosed.
be able to diagnose pancreatic cancer sooner?
Yes, there are two directions that are being pursued to diagnosing somebody sooner. And one is blood test. So there's such a thing called ctDNA, circulating tumor DNA. So when cancers become apparent in the body, they will shed some cancer cells or pre-cancer cells into the blood. And their DNA is basically their fingerprint. It will be different from your normal cells. So people have developed a way of detecting those. The problem is we all have a lot of precancerous cells in our body when we get to a certain age. So there is a high frequency of false alarm. So if you test 100 patients, maybe 10 of them will have abnormal findings, but maybe just one of them will have the real cancer. But the other 9 will be we don't be able to
False
sleep. Yeah. So that's a
Freaked out, yeah.
they're freaked out. So the other direction is doing some kind of fancy imaging. So the best imaging we have right now for detecting cancer, mammogram, for breast cancer, and for colon colonoscopy. For pancreatic cancer, we don't have anything. And we at Washington, we actually developed a PET scan. So the PET scan will be able to differentiate whether something that's hot in the body is inflammation or the real cancer. So we have to study, and of course, not one study is enough. You have to combine it from many things. But so far, at this point, at this moment, we just have to pay attention to people who are at high risk. If you have 1 or 2 direct family members who have been diagnosed, and you are at higher risk, if you get diagnosed with diabetes in your late 40s or 50s, that's a warning sign. Because typically people develop diabetes in their 30s, 40s, but you have late onset, that's a warning sign. If you have chronic pancreatitis, gallstones, all those things, these are high risk factors for pancreatic cancer.
Yeah, so I'll mention here, it's a fear that I try not to let my mind go there, but now my children are predispositioned and have a direct, their father. So it's another reason I'm, shouting from the rooftops and working so hard so that there are better options for their generation and the generations to come, right? Because what we do now will help long-term. Johanna, I think you wanted to ask a question.
I was curious, is the number of pancreatic cancers higher in the U.S. compared to worldwide because of our horrible diet?
Yeah.
Sorry, I need to read the question
Go ahead.
for those listening. The question was, are the number of patients getting pancreatic cancer higher in the U.S. because of what we're eating, all the junk in our food, versus other parts of the world?
Yeah, actually it's rising globally. And if you look at the trend, it's actually higher in certain developing countries because of the environmental pollution. And in the US, it definitely is rising. And a lot of other countries don't keep a good track record on how many patients are diagnosed per year with a certain cancer, but the US does the best job in documenting how many patients are diagnosed per year and what kind of cancer at what age. So we have the best data, and it is rising. And it's rising, unfortunately, amongst younger people too, particularly the female population. Reasons we don't know yet. There are many theories out there, so we're still working on it, figuring out why.
Okay, any last questions before we let this man go home? He's had a long day. Go ahead.
Are there any other countries that offer any type of alternative care that the FDA doesn't approve in the states that's helping?
Yeah.
I gotta repeat that question.
Go ahead.
Are there any alternative medications or solutions in other parts of the world that the FDA is not approving here?
Yeah, there are many other options that are being delivered in many other countries, but none of which I know is very effective. There are a lot of herbal supplements. Some people would use what called stem cell therapies, and none of which have been shown to be really effective. We pay attention to all these things all the time. As a scientist, I mean, what better to do on a weekend or on a Sunday morning when we're reading all these things. So if something really works, because this disease is so desperate for a breakthrough, we will know. And so far, nothing has really panned out. So I think we are doing the best job. The survival rate for pancreatic cancer is the highest in the US than other places. If you go to China, for example, I have a lot of scholars from China all the time in my lab visiting and exchanging ideas. The survival there is not even, we are averaging 1.5 years to 2 years. Yes, not even a year.
Dr. Lim, what's the split between men and women? And what's the earliest you've ever seen?
Yeah, it's about,
The question is, what's the split between men and women, and what's the earliest you've seen it?
so the split between men is 50-50, is slightly more towards men in general. But if you look at the younger population, it's actually the reverse. It's actually more female than male in the younger population, below 50, but below 50.
Mm-hmm.
The youngest I've seen is 27.
Oh my gosh.
So it's really sad.
Other question?
What is the difference between, Dr. Lim, the difference between this particular study that you're still in the process of raising money for, and the studies that you already currently have running? What's the difference between the studies?
Well, oh, sorry, you looked at me this time. What are the difference between the studies that are currently happening and these new studies that are, about to be run?
So the study that I was trying to open, put Kyle on, is based on immunotherapy. So if you think about how we treat pancreatic cancer, if you think about chemotherapy, it's basically a cocktail of toxic agents. If you have a lawn and you have weeds growing, those are cancer. Chemotherapy is a combination of different weed killers that you throw into your lawn. And if you're crossing your fingers that the weed will be killed before your lawn, and usually it's both. And immunotherapy is a way of strengthening your lawn. It's like a turf builder. So that's needed in order for the body to be able to go after the cancer automatically. So you don't have to give the patient chemotherapy all the time. That whole process is to use chemotherapy to weaken the cancer, allow your body's immune system to overcome it, and then you need some special drug and some immunotherapy like Keytruda. I strongly believe in Kyle. We have achieved that in Kyle because for a long period of time he did not get any chemo, and the body was able to control the tumor on its own. That's the whole purpose of immunotherapy.
His tumor markers were going down.
Despite not being on chemo. So you are training the body into recognizing the tumor. And that's one strategy. The second strategy that we're working on right now is based on targeted therapy. So the first therapy that we were trying to do did not care what kind of mutation you have in the pancreatic cancer. This one is different. We have identified, we know for a long time that there's a gene that is mutated in the cancer cells, but not in normal cells. Now there's a drug. So what we find is that if you treat pancreas cancer with this drug, it will try to survive. It's as if you would try to basically express a lot of antennas on the surface, like a receptor to receive signals. It's like an SOS signal.
The cancer cells?
The cancer cells. The receptor is called HER2, which is present in some breast cancer patients. You give them Herceptin, that's the same drug. So when it's trying to survive by expressing these receptors, you feed them with toxins. So you're basically using the survival mechanism as a way to kill them. So we find that in this setting, you can tumor disappear in many patients. So we use the drug alone in cancer patients, but we combine it and it works beautifully in mice. So these are two different strategies, and they are not mutually exclusive. If this doesn't work for that patient, we are hoping that we'll be able to give the other strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, Dr. Lim, I mean, I cannot thank you enough for all that you do, taking on Kyle as a patient and walking us through that 17-month journey. Cancer is a beast, right? It's not just the cancer patient, it's the family. And what happens during the treatment and after the treatment, whether you survive it or not. You know, it's all encompassing. So together we can move mountains. I believe that. And I'm not asking for one person to fund this fund, but I am asking for everybody who is, you know, cares about their loved ones and has any idea about the lack of funding for cancer to pick a cancer. Maybe it's not pancreatic cancer or colorectal cancer, but pick a cancer and fund it. Find a researcher that is, you know, has some really promising studies, and talk about it, give money to it, because it matters. Every dollar counts, and when you feed it at the seed at the bottom, like what Pedal the Cause does, it just helps everybody. It helps everybody. And if this works for pancreatic cancer, this is one last thing I'm going to say, and then we'll close out. If something like this works for pancreatic cancer, one of the toughest cancers to treat. Imagine what it will do for other GI cancers.
Right.
And there's even glioblastoma, right? There's other oncologists treating other types of tumors that are looking at these treatments. So it's not just pancreatic cancer, it goes well beyond. So one final thing, Dr. Lim, if there's one thing that someone has said to you throughout your life that made a difference, what would that be?
Yeah, it would be what my dad told me. Make the world a better place. That's what I strongly believe in, and that's something that I hold dear to my heart. And that's also the attitude that I have when I go in to see a new patient. I saw two today, and it's really important because people come in, they're afraid, they're frightened, they don't know what to expect. It's really important to come down from your high horses. I don't have a high horse. Sit there, talk to them, listen to them, and don't. I think that's just the way I carry myself.
Yeah.
But back to the comment, I really want to say that. So we call it the Andersen regimen.
The Andersen regimen.
So that clinical trial, we're fortunate enough to open a stomach cancer. So the National Cancer Institute is opening that for pancreatic cancer. We are finally able, through the Simon Medicine funding, it came from Pedal the Cause. So Patrick Pierce, my colleague, is opening that study for stomach cancer patients. 3 patients were treated so far. Usually for stomach cancer, it's basically just, if you look at pancreatic cancer at the bottom, the second one is stomach cancer in terms of death rate. If you give them chemotherapy and immunotherapy, you expect 40% to respond. So we treated 4 patients so far. 3 patients responded. 1 patient, the tumor completely disappeared.
That's amazing.
Like completely disappeared, a complete response.
That's amazing. So that's a great example. Kyle's study got into stomach cancer patients and it worked, which is incredible. And we keep pointing to Pedal the Cause because we are raising funds with Pedal the Cause. They do fund research at the bottom level. They're actually starting to fund a little bit higher up as well as far as the life of the study. But Kyle's treatment was actually initially funded at a seeded level through Pedal the Cause. So it's why I joined, one of the reasons I joined Pedal the Cause, and knowing that we know right where the money's going. So that's a really important point to make and why we partner with Pedal the Cause. One last question. If you had one piece of advice or one thing you want everybody to walk away with after this conversation, what would it be?
Don't lose hope. There is always people who are doing their job, making things better. Don't lose hope, and don't be afraid of. There's 2 pieces of question. The second is don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't lose hope, and here Simon will be with you.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Lim.
Here.
Yes.
I just, on that exact thing that you just said, I just wanted to ask a very important question, and I thought it was kind of stupid the more I thought about it. Is there anything, because it's generally asymptomatic, but all the cases that we've read and heard about all started with the same symptoms my brother had, that it masked itself as stress, maybe ulcers, started with the back pain, the abdominal. Is there anything that you suggest to do that would be akin to like a self-breast examination, or like Kira said, know your body, and like you just said, don't be afraid to ask questions. Is there anything that they're retraining like physicians in the ER that have passed over some red flags that could have pointed to earlier detection?
Great question.
Yeah, so
Well, the question is, are there any signs and symptoms, essentially, anything we can identify in our body that we really should continue to ask more questions about?
yeah, so pancreatic cancer is really hard to detect. It is, if you look at the anatomy, do a cross section, if you ever look at the CT scan of a cross section of a human body, it is right in the middle and just a little bit in front of your spine. So there's no way you can feel your pancreas. And it is right around a lot of different organs, including the duodenum, nerves, spine, and the bowel duct. So all these things a lot more common to cause pain than the pancreas itself. So you're more likely to have back pain than a pancreatic cancer, but they all manifest in similar symptoms. Pain here, who doesn't have pain around here once in a lifetime? All of us, myself included. Would you think of pancreatic cancer as the first in your differential diagnosis? No.
Well, now, yes. But
So I think it's really important because you are your own advocate. You are your own advocate.
Thank you for listening to Yes We Can. I'll see you next week.
Something's not right. Yes. The BCPR doctor this year with complaints. They just give you some medication, some pain medication, go home and talk to your primary care and things like that. If something's not right, keep raising your hand and keep asking questions. And the sooner you catch it, better the outcome. So I think that's something that is really unfortunate here because none of us, before I was trained, none of us professional, medical professional, you believe in your doctor, but you know yourself the best.
It's a great question. Yeah. And Kyle's was actually, dare I say, misdiagnosed for a year. They thought it was IBS and anything else, but not cancer, because he was so young. He was 47 at diagnosis. But okay, that's it. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Yes We Can podcast. Please like, comment, send to your friends.